Good evening, Antioch family. Thank you for joining us for Checkpoint. I'm Kristen Price, and I'm joined this evening by our pastor, Pastor Chris, and Dr. Johnson. We would like to share some information with you regarding mental illness and mental health as it relates to what we are experiencing in our world today. Before Pastor Chris and Dr. Johnson joins us, here is a little information I'd like to share with you. On Saturday, head over to afmbc.org at any point in time. There you will experience our family ties. There is content there available for all ages. Join us on Sunday at 10 o'clock a.m. for an awesome worship experience with Antioch Unplugged. You don't want to miss it. Also on Sunday evening at 6 o'clock p.m., that is the start of our Holy Week. We will have cross conversations every evening available to you. So be sure and go ahead and submit your questions online as Pastor Chris and Dr. Johnson stand by to answer whatever questions you may have regarding what we are experiencing in our world today as it relates to coronavirus.
Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Pastor Chris, and thank you for tuning in to the first edition of what we're calling the Checkpoint. It's simply a time where we're gonna set aside a few minutes just to check in and talk through some things that you might be experiencing or dealing with. We believe that ministry is supposed to be holistic, not just about the spirit, but about the mind, the body, and the soul. And so today, I'm joined by Dr. Katie Johnson, who is our Director of Counseling Services here at the Antioch Fellowship Church. And we just want to check in today for our checkpoint. We want to check in on mental health. I know that, as we've been kind of sheltered in place and dealing with all the things that are going on in our world, there may be a lot of questions, concerns, um, and you may be dealing with some things. And so we just want to speak to it. So thanks for joining me tonight, Dr. Katie. Thank you so much for hanging out. And the first thing I want to ask personally is, I think that as we kind of hear so much negativity regarding some of the things that are going on, it creates a sense of anxiety. Maybe people have been in the house, they've been dealing with a lot of things that might not be accustomed to dealing with. There are questions they might not have answers to. And what I'm kind of discovering is it seems like anxiety or wondering what's going on or concern seems to be a dominating emotion or idea. So let's speak to that for a little bit. What do you see as it relates to that? How can people handle that anxiety that they may be feeling while sitting at home?
Absolutely, and I think you're right. And thank you so much for inviting me. I think the first thing, the very practical thing to do is stop watching TV all the time.
Mm,
Just disconnect from the news, disconnect from Facebook, anything that's negative that may be creating the anxiety. People can control that part of their
mm-hmm.
environment. The other thing is that people can separate their facts from their feelings.
Wow.
What's the basis of the anxiety? Because the good news, if there's a silver lining in all of this, I believe people are going to come through healthier mentally than they were before we started all of this.
Absolutely.
Because it's a time for introspection, a time for absolutely drawing closer to the Lord for as believers. So I think that the anxiety is created because of the unknown,
Mm-hmm.
and people we're a very predictable society. And when things are seemingly out of our control, that we don't oftentimes handle that well.
Yeah, and one of the things we've shared, from a spiritual standpoint, is yes, there are some things going on that we haven't seen before, but there's not an unknown. If you're a believer and you trust God's word, you know how it
Amen.
ends,
How it ends.
right? But you brought up something, cancel that out. Don't watch negative things. Get off Facebook. Turn off the TV. What are some healthy things that you would recommend replacing that time doing?
Oh, I'm thinking people are finding that it's wonderful to be with their family.
Yeah.
That I'm guessing some parents are discovering teenagers, some of the idiosyncrasies of being a teenage boy or a teenage girl in America, in our homes, some of the nuances of the little guys, the little people. People really are slowing down and looking at the people in their own family and in their own household. And I think they're really enjoying that. So more conversations. I think there's some blind spots perhaps because we're so busy and there's no soccer to go to now, no football, no this, no that, and the other. I think some of the history of families, this is a good time to talk about, way back when. Call grandma or grandpa, FaceTime them if they're comfortable with that, and just talk about how things used to be and just slow that history of the family and the connection that young people are missing to the airship and to the past. So they can absolutely do that. Routine, please, folks, take a bath every day. It's just a good idea. Take a bath, do all the things that you normally do. Don't stay in bed all day, but establish a healthy routine that some of us are still working from home. We have those responsibilities, but if you don't, you still need a routine and really search in terms of the things that you've always wanted to do that practically you have an opportunity to do now. God has given us a wonderful opportunity. For me, it's to learn to crochet. It's to learn how to play the keyboard that was gifted to me 14, 15 years ago.
Wow.
All kinds of things. It's, for me, stripping down that antique dresser that I bought a long time ago. So there's some things that we've been wanting to do that we just haven't had time to do.
For sure.
And haven't had the mind space to want to do it.
For sure.
But as we slow down, things are getting a little bit different for us.
Yeah, they are. You mentioned something else really good. You talked about that parenting tension. What I'm discovering is, kids are home from school of all ages, and there might be some tension there.
Oh boy.
The parents frustrated with kids, like you said, ain't staying off the phone or always on social media. And there seems to be, I think the more you're around somebody, you kind of realize that there's things that you didn't really know, and you don't really know how to deal with each other. And then especially as particularly teenagers are starting to develop their own worldviews.
Yes.
I think one of the reasons there's a sense of tension is that they're discovering that some of their worldviews, and everybody goes through it at a certain point, that their worldview is a little bit different than their parents' worldview.
Right.
And that because of that, it's creating some tension in the home.
It is.
Right. And of course, we stand on the word, children, obey your parents,
Right.
honor your father and your mother. Please don't hear me minimize that, parents. But at the same time, the Bible says that the parents ought not provoke their children to wrath. So there's this tension that's happening because of different ideologies and ideas about life. Speak to that tension. How can parents and children kind of get together on one accord right now and it not feel like a war zone in the house, or it not feel like everything your child does makes you mad, or everything your parent does makes you mad? How can you handle that during this season?
Well, the connecting again. Understand, parents, that your children are developmentally appropriate where they are. The teenage years are volatile years. We all remember teenage years, and we either sigh or we cry because of those years. But as a part of your launching a teenager into adulthood and young adulthood, the tension is necessary. When young people come in and I ask parents, I ask the teenager, the child, how old does mom or dad treat you? And if it's a 15-year-old, they are more likely to say, like I'm 10, like I'm 11, like I'm 12, but not like I'm 15. Oftentimes, children under our care grow up, but we never connect their age to where they are. We kind of cast them in, that's just mine. My mom always called me the baby. Full grown, but I was always the baby. She saw me in that die cast as the last child that she had, and I never quite grew out of that. Even as an adult person, it's gonna be okay. But when that worldview that you talk about differs from the parents, parents really need to listen. There comes a time to simply believe it or not, and it goes against some of the rearings that we all had. But there's a time to just sit down and listen to your child's view. Maybe he or she has something to say to you that you need to hear to gain a better understanding of your own child.
Right.
Because with the exposure that they have outside of the home, our kids are being bombarded with everything literally that can go through their minds. For you to sit down and listen, you don't always have to agree, but it's helping them to develop a point of view and ask questions. Tell me, what do you mean by that? That's interesting. Why would you say that? But don't just, like you say, don't just shut them down because you're the authoritarian. Listen to them. Young people have something to contribute.
Amen. My dad used to talk about it with me and my brothers as we kind of grew into our teenage years. He would say that there's going to come a point where I'm going to transition from parent to partner.
And that's
and
good.
it's something that we talk about all the time. Listen, this is a live session. We're here right now, so please make sure you're submitting some questions. We want to get to answer some of your questions as we kind of journey through our time. We're not going to spend a lot of time, but if you're watching live and you have some questions about mental health and dealing with some things, Dr. Katie Johnson is here to answer some of those counseling and mental health questions. Now, I'm going to deal with one that's really personal for me, what I'm kind of enduring, and maybe some of you who are watching or who will watch this kind of find yourself in the same space. Some of us have gone through traumatic things, in the course of the last year, a few months. For me, it's dealing with the loss of my father and some other mentors and family members in the last few months. But I was able to work through it, right? So as you're working and as you're busy, you find yourself just kind of going through the motions of life. But now that life has started to stop, there are certain moments of grief that you hadn't had to deal with before. But now you're kind of at the house. Somebody might be at the house by themselves alone, having to process through things and think through things that their busyness kept them from having to handle. So I guess the question is, in these moments, how do you handle grief in isolation that you didn't expect? Or with the lack of business or lack of ability to turn your attention to something else?
And believe it or not, grief will come back to you in this isolation, in this downtime and thinking time. I had thought about my mom. My mom's been gone 27 years.
Wow.
And I just had a slight moment because I in the downtime, if I was busy, I would not have had that moment. But if we don't process grief, if we don't do something, preferably something that's very positive with our grief, it will always be with us. God is so good in his infinite wisdom. He has slowed all of us down to a point that we are forced to have to think about some things.
Right.
The schedule that we thought we controlled, we don't have any more control over the schedule. Things may start off one way, something happens at noon, and then everything is upside down. Grief is a natural process. Grief is a way of saying that I really love somebody, but when we're busy, most of us, and this comes out in our Grief Share group, Pastor, most people that come to Grief Share, they only come after the loss of a loved one, and sometimes it's years. One woman was in Grief Share after 9 years after the loss. But if we just pay attention to it, I guess that's the point. I miss this person. I love this person. I long for this person. I'm feeling that there's a void right now. I can really feel it, and that's a lot of mercy and a lot of transparency for you to even say, now that I'm just slowing down, I'm getting in touch with that. I think that's a good place to be, just from an emotional standpoint.
And that's what it's about. In all of this, we have to stay healthy mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. We can't allow not being able to gather normally to keep us from having to have these conversations. And I think that, and these are the sorts of things that we have to deal with now. One of the things, I was talking to a pastor friend of mine today who said, as he's been with his church staff, they have been intentionally praying against suicide, primarily because they feel like depression is going to have to rise in isolation. I was having a conversation right when all this happened about, pray for the person who the only thing keeping them sane was that they had to be around people, and now they're forced to go home alone, right, and deal with their thoughts. So speak to somebody who may be sitting at home by themselves, and every time they're home, they get depressed, and they may have stumbled upon this conversation and this checkpoint. How do you handle those moments of depression and loneliness in isolation, when the isolation is kind of something that's forced on you right now?
And it's real. The people don't hurt yourself. Don't commit suicide, because it's so final. We're all going to get through this. This is temporary, and suicide is such a permanent response to something that's temporary. If you are feeling those feelings of depression, and some of the things to look for, if you want to isolate, if you're just fatigued, that it's real difficult for you to get out of bed. People want to stay in bed when they're feeling depressed. If you're crying and there's absolutely no apparent reason for you to cry, loss of concentration, loss of focus, some of those are the signs of depression. Suicide is not the answer, though. Suicide is, if the enemy is telling you that suicide is the answer for you, I want you to really just walk that back. What I would invite you to do is have a conversation with someone. Don't sit in isolation, unkept. Your houses around you, your surroundings are really becoming untidy, unkept. Get up and regain your life. This is temporary. This time, next month, next year, coronavirus would be something in the history books, and you won't be here. But if you stay, if you make a decision that you're not going to hurt yourself, take the precious life that God has given you. And there's so many different sources and resources that you can look to. Take my number, 972-896-5569. 972-896-5569. Call me. We can talk through it. Call the suicide hotline. It's an 800 number. Really don't get yourself pushed to that place. If you have family, friends, coworkers, someone you can reach out to, that you say, I'm in a bad place. I think the good news, Pastor Chris, is that Corona is making us feel what we feel, and there's an environment across the whole world that lonely people can say, I'm lonely. Suicide people can say, I feel like killing myself, and there's no stigma. There's almost an expectation that we're all going to be depressed, we're going to be lonely, we're going to feel isolated, and it's, for the first time in the history of the world, it's okay. So say that to someone, say that to yourself, I'm lonely, I feel like hurting myself, but don't follow through on the act.
Amen. There's so many resources, and like Dr. Katie said, we don't want you feeling lonely. Even though you might have to be quarantined or isolated or by yourself, you're not by yourself. You're never alone. You have a community of faith that cares about you. You have people who love you and care for you. Reach out, right? Make sure you reach out, and don't take that step. Again, we're taking some questions. As a matter of fact, let's take one right now. Since social media is big and is being used more now, should we as believers send positive messages to offset the negative? So maybe the conversation is, if you see a bunch of negativity on social media, should we put positive stuff out to offset it? I would love to hear your answer on this, Dr. Katie.
Well, I've tried it. And there's a great backlash. And I think that's one of those times you pick your battles.
Right.
If you want to enter into a battle with people who are not saved, people who have a whole different ideology, socially, racially, ethnically, politically than you do, and you want to get into that dogfight, if you have the stamina for it, get into it. I advise that you just pick your battles. It may not be worth it.
And I'm going to agree with that. There was a time when I was going to say it. If I saw it, I was going to attack it. And then I realized it's like, look, one, that is a long battle that you don't want to fight.
Long.
And two, there's nothing you can say that's not going to be misinterpreted or misunderstood. And then thirdly, it's hard to fight battles with people when your basis and foundation for life is totally different. If my basis and foundation for life is the scripture, and the person who I'm having a discussion with does not believe in the scriptures or believe in the same way that I do, then ultimately we're always going to be opposed to each other from our opinion standpoint, because ours is rooted in the gospel and theirs is rooted in whatever else. I think social media is a tool, right? That's why we're streaming on it now. This is our ability, or this is our effort to combat a lot of the negativity that we see. But at the same time, we just have to understand that while it's a tool for us to express positively, it cannot be a trap for us to fall into a silo, or fall into a cycle rather, of debate and disagreement, when we know what we're called to represent. You know, the Bible calls us in 1 Timothy chapter 2 to live peaceably and to live quiet lives. We don't gotta fight. You know what I mean? We are always ready to defend our faith, but that don't mean we always gotta fight about it. But that's a great question.
It is.
What kind of strategies can be applied to release anxiety? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling concerned. I'm feeling anxious. I've turned off the TV. I might not have family with me or whatever the case. I've turned off TV. I've gotten off social media, but I'm stuck in the house. So what are some things I can do to release that anxiety?
Ooh, walk outside. Weather permitting, walk outside, change the scenery, go from the confines of your home into the outdoors. If it's a balcony, if you're in an apartment, backyard, take a stroll, get in the sunshine for a minute, come back in and really start to talk to yourself. Change your thinking and change your life. Do some self-talk. It's a good therapeutic tool to talk yourself down. How am I really feeling? Wait a minute. This isn't as bad as I think it is. Where is it written that? Really talk yourself down. And you can command your body to do what I tell you to do. You are not anxious right now. Whatever thoughts have that thread of thought that leads us to anxiety, that you can interrupt that along that thread at some point in time. And please, sir, ma'am, if you are active in a disorder, and a psych or an MD has prescribed your medication for anxiety, take your medication.
Please, Lord.
Talk to them about getting 2 months worth of prescriptions. You don't want to run out of your medication if you're anxiety. Don't go to the refrigerator and start eating. Don't trick, like Pastor Chris just said, don't track those things down on Facebook, because that's going to increase your anxiety. But really have productive things around yourself that you can do all day long. Make a schedule, make a routine. And I'm not saying, because everybody's different. If you have a 5-day routine, give yourself a day off on Wednesday, or give yourself a day off on Saturday. But we really need to plan how we're going to spend our days. That whole fog of just sitting in a dark room and you're unshaven, or your hair is not combed, or whatever, that's a setup for an attack that you don't want to have to face that.
I feel like Dr. Katie just came to me with my hair and my unshaven. It's not my barber's off. I'm sorry, that's my barber.
Well, listen, I can't go. Listen, we all see those hands.
Yeah, thank y'all for tuning in. We're gonna take a few
Thank
more questions, but I just want to encourage whoever that was on that last question. Philippians chapter 4. Whatsoever things are pure and true,
think of these
of good report. Think of these things. Think on these things. Allow your mind that positive self talk. Think of some good things and rehearse those things. There's so much negativity out there that the more you rehearse negativity, the more you'll find yourself anxious and sad and depressed. So find some good things, some beautiful things, some things of good report, some things to boost you up. Don't look at the fact that people are getting sick. Look at the fact that people are recovering. Don't look at the things that seem to be going wrong. Find some things to focus on that are still worthy of praise, is what the text says. So I totally agree with those things. Let's see. I think we got another one. Unfortunately, this is true. We as African Americans shy away from professional counseling. Should this topic be discussed more? Well, I can answer that before I even toss it to Dr. Katie. Yes, absolutely. I understand that there's a stigma of weakness for us when we feel like we need help. We hear stuff about, what goes on in this house stays in this house, or, especially as black men, the idea that we have to be macho, we have to carry all that stuff because that's what our fathers did and our grandfathers did. And it is manly to carry that stuff. Man, listen, it is dangerous to carry that stuff. And so one of the things that we as a church, again, Dr. Katie Johnson is here. She's on staff at the Antioch Church because as a church family, we think it's important that we do this. That there is nothing wrong with trusting Jesus with everything. And going to counseling. And I'm not saying that as somebody from the outside. I'm saying that as somebody who personally goes to counseling. It is a therapeutic, necessary thing. So it should be discussed more. But not only should it be discussed more, I also feel like it's something that we need to give people access to more, which is why we're having this conversation and why Dr. Katie is a part of our team, and she's fantastic. So I ain't had to toss that question over. That one, that's something that we stand on and we believe in. Listen, our time, it's almost 8:30, man. Our time has been well spent. It went fast. So as you know, there's this whole coronavirus, and we don't know when things are gonna change. I told somebody it feels like, for me, that one day I feel like I finally get a routine going. For some of us, we've been in transition anyway, right? You finally get a routine going. You finally get that day-to-day thing going. And then we wake up one morning.
It's all different.
I remember where I was when I got the call that everything was changing. And now I'm trying to figure out what does a healthy routine look like. So you mentioned it a few times. So what is a healthy daily routine? What does that look like? I know we have some people who aren't working at all. Some people who are working from home. Some people who are by themselves. Some people who have their whole families with them. So in your mind, just kind of paint with a broad stroke, because every individual situation is different. What are some things that should be on everybody's schedule every day?
Well, first things first, pray.
Amen.
Amen. Those spiritual disciplines. Start your day. I mean, it really is true. Start your day with prayer, devotion. Start your day with the Lord. It's the best thing to do as believers. And it's scriptural, and it sets the tone for the whole day. Then you've got to do those ADLs, activities of daily living. You've got to clean yourself up. You've got to feel pretty good about yourself. Make up your bed. It really is interesting to me that people don't make up their beds, because it makes it more difficult for me to go home when my bed is not made. So a part of the routine is you're establishing now, and some good habits for after Corona. Make up your bed. Live like you're grateful for what God has given you in terms of the possessions that you have. It's that closet. Some things that you have been putting off, we have been putting off. The closets that need to be addressed, the yard that needs to be cleaned, the pantry that needs to be addressed, the oven that needs to be cleaned. All the things, some of the things that you've been putting off would be a part of a healthy daily routine. Reaching out to people, reaching out, talking to people in your community, whether that's and don't forget your community right now because of technology is worldwide. That you can it can be people in LA, it can be people in Brazil, whomever is a part of your community. Reach out to them on a pretty regular basis. Do eat well though. I'm not saying get into bondage because probably when I leave here I'm going to Brahms. So don't get into bondage, but try to eat something wholesome each day. Take supplements if you need to. As a part of a routine, take supplements if you need to. The things that you've been putting off, get back to those things. We've been delaying some things because of time constraints. Now that you don't have to commute to work, now you have more time. And if you are working from home, work your schedule that you would ordinarily have in the workplace. Get your job done to earn your paycheck. And when you've done the work, break for lunch. I mean, have a lunch break at a scheduled time. Eat well. Work the rest of the afternoon. Have a good dinner or not, depending on what your dietary restraints are. Talk to people at the end of the day. Read something. Read great books. I mean, read something. You do watch TV. Do not spend all day watching TV because it will show up. The statistics are there. It'll show up in your health, in your heart, in swollen legs. It's going to show up in all kinds of ways. So you establish a routine, but across the board, Jesus first, and make Jesus the end of the day, and you're going to have a pretty good day with everything in the middle.
And here's the last thing, and I know it's past 8:30. Here's the last question I want to answer because it's so true. What are some encouraging words that we can share with friends and families who are currently grieving the loss of a loved one due to COVID-19? And one of the things I'll kind of even stretch that question a little bit, not just due to COVID-19, but because of COVID-19, it's affected the way people have to deal with loss in general. People can't get into hospitals and be with their families or into nursing homes to be with their sick, elderly, family members. They can't have a funeral like normal. So what are some encouraging words we can share with someone who's dealing with the loss of a loved one during this season?
The good news for us is that we're saved. And if that person was saved, absent from the body, present with the Lord.
Absolutely.
That's the best news of the day for us.
Yes, it is.
But if you can't get to that, we ritualize death. And I used to teach sociology to college students, and the rituals that we have from birth to death, we ritualize it so that we feel as though we're perhaps not honoring the deceased person if we can't be by their bedside, if we can't have a funeral, if we can't have a funeral, if we can't go to the grave. We ritualized it so very much that we feel as though there's a dishonor when we're not able to do those things. When we look through the biblical context of God's business and things we don't understand, if God has given it to us, he's either wanting us to use it or he's absolutely given it to us for our growth. The person is gone, but the memories of that person, whether you were there when they passed or not, if you think about the number of military members who have sacrificed their lives on foreign soil. No family members were there. Nothing.
So true.
No ritual at all. No
true.
ritual at all. And the peace that military members' families have to face because they've lost a loved one, and every time they deploy loved ones, that's something they have to come to terms with. It's gonna be okay, because the good news for us again is we're gonna see that person again.
Absolutely.
We're gonna see that person. Then this is where we really hold on to our faith. Hold on to our faith. If Jesus has allowed it, it's going to be for us, for our good.
And that's what Paul said in 1 Thessalonians. Somebody, I'll tell you a mystery. Those of us, who remain will be caught up to meet those in the air. And he talks about all of these beautiful promises, and then it says, "Comfort one another with these words." Yes. Those words are comforting. The promises of the Lord regarding those of us who die in the Lord are comforting. So comfort one another with those words from the scriptures. Listen, thank y'all so much for joining us for for this installment of the Checkpoint. Thank you, Dr. Katie, for hanging out.
Thank you.
Listen, I just want to pray over us real quick, and then we'll log out. Don't forget those updates that Kristen shared with us earlier. So many exciting things, starting with Family Ties on Saturday. Go to www.afnbc.org and check that out. And I'm excited to see you Sunday morning at Antioch Unplugged. So let's close our time together in prayer. God, thank you that you care about us. Thank you that we can cast our cares on you, cast our anxieties on you because you care for us. Lord, thank you that you are as concerned with us mentally as you are spiritually, like you care for us to be holistic, what James would call perfect and complete, lacking nothing. You want us to be healthy and whole in every area. And so, Lord, we submit these things to you, our anxieties and depressions and grief and tension and all of the things that concern us. Thank you that you care. Thank you that you have an answer. Thank you that you have a plan. So, Lord, I pray and ask that you would help us to hear what you have to say to us regarding these things, that you would help us to be all you've called us to be, and that you would help us to spend this time being whole and being healed from everything. We love you and we bless your name. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Bye.
You good?